Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another video on the channel. This is not... Never really made a video about like this. Usually, one of my number one rules is to never get involved in politics, but unfortunately this just so directly affects me and so many of you and just so many other people, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I can't really not talk about it. So today, as you can tell by the title of the video, we're talking about... I'm not using this mic. We're talking about the EPA basically trying to do, for lack of a better phrase, a new interpretation of the Clean Air Act, which basically makes it a lot more difficult for people to take street cars and modify them or turn them into full dedicated track cars. Which obviously I have a problem with. Obviously most of you are going to have a problem with. And so we're just going to talk about it. I just wanted to bring your guys' awareness to it. So before I waste any more time, I'm going to give you guys an article that will help you achieve a better level of understanding of the situation. So here we have an article on SEMA.org. The URL is literally SEMA.org/EPA-news. Very easy URL to write yourself, but I will be putting it both in the description and the comments. I urge you to read this, but just in case you're not a reader, I will try to read this as best I can. So, protect your right to race. The EPA is banning race cars. Tell Congress to pass the RPM Act now and stop the EPA from destroying motorsports. Your member of Congress needs to hear from you now. That's the main title. Street vehicles, cars, trucks, and motorcycles can't be converted into race cars, according to the EPA. The EPA has announced that enforcement against high-performance parts, including superchargers, tuners, whatever a tuner is, I guess an ECU flash. I have a feeling the EPA doesn't know what they're talking about. So tuners and exhaust systems. So turbochargers are fine, apparently. So because so. Just from that right there, according to that, my last car would have been illegal according to their new interpretation of what I believe is the Clean Air Act. I think I've already said that. Because for those of you that don't know, I had a 2015 Subaru WRX. It had a big carbon wing. It had a full exhaust system, high flow cats, titanium muffler. It had an intake and a tune, or a tuner. It passed emissions. It wasn't a race car. It was just faster than stock. It wasn't a menace to society, but according to this new interpretation of the EPA, it would be illegal on a federal level. Next bullet point, even if you are one of the hundreds of thousands of enthusiasts who contacted Congress in the past, we need your support again. And they're referring to the fact that this has happened in 2015 before, where the EPA tried to do this before. And God, there's a fantastic clip. There's a fantastic clip. We'll get to that in a second, of an EPA member or EPA representative basically having no idea what they're talking about when it comes to motorsports, and not even knowing the details of the amendment of the Clean Air Act or new interpretation. Like, they had no idea. But so tell the bureaucrats in Washington that race cars are off limits. And remember, this includes, we're not just talking about cars that have been made catless for racing. We're talking about anything from Honda Civics with turbos and exhausts to Mustangs with new superchargers. It doesn't have to be necessarily what would be illegal today. It is just, as far as I can tell, anything at all. There is a link. I've already done this myself. I urge you to compose a message and have it be sent to your senators and representatives. Put your name, your email, but make sure it's not just you that's doing this, because the whole reason why they think they're able to do this is because there aren't a lot of us. The automotive community, when it comes to enthusiasts, we're a minority. We're not a huge group of people. There are a lot of us spanning throughout the US, but we're a small percentage of the US population. Granted, it doesn't just affect us. It affects people's jobs. It affects, what is it? The industry of making aftermarket parts for cars, which would also be made illegal if this goes through, is like a $2 billion industry. So that's not really... The world is not in a great state to have something that big be taken away, because a lot of people are already losing jobs. A lot of people's incomes are not great. A lot of people have had a lot of bad things happen to them as a result of the pandemic. And the EPA has decided that they want to basically have a similar effect as the coronavirus on a lot of people. So that's unfortunate. So just compose that message. Make sure it's not just you doing it. Make sure you can spread this to people who aren't necessarily enthusiasts, because we need to make sure that they can hear us when we say, this isn't okay. This doesn't make sense. So let's go down. The RPM Act is common sense, bipartisan legislation to protect Americans' rights to convert street vehicles, cars, trucks, and motorcycles into dedicated racers, or race cars, and the motorsports parts industry's ability to sell products that enable racers to compete. The bill clarifies that it is legal to make emissions-related changes to a street vehicle for the purpose of converting it into a race car used exclusively for competition. It also confirms that it is legal to produce, market, and install racing equipment. The RPM Act reverses the EPA's interpretation that the Clean Air Act does not allow a motor vehicle designed for street use, including a car, truck, or motorcycle, to be converted into a dedicated race car. This American tradition was unquestioned for nearly 15 years until 2015, when the EPA took the position that converted vehicles must remain emissions compliant, even though they are no longer driven on public streets or highways, which doesn't make a ton of sense. Although the EPA did not finalize the proposed rule, the agency still maintains the practice of modifying the emission system of a motor vehicle for the purpose of converting it in for racing is illegal. Manufacturing, selling, and installing race parts for the converted vehicle would also be a violation, as I said. The EPA has also announced that enforcement against high-performance parts, including superchargers, tuners, and exhaust systems, is a top priority. Man, we thought California was bad. They're trying to make this a nationwide thing. Motorsports competition involves tens of thousands of participants and vehicle owners each year, both amateur and professional. Retail sales of racing products make up a nearly $2 billion market annually. I think it was a $1 billion market 5 years ago. Most of the vehicles raced on the estimated 1,300 racetracks operating across the U.S. are converted vehicles that the EPA considers to be illegal. The RPM Act does not interfere with the EPA's authority to enforce against individuals who illegally install race parts on vehicles driven on public roads and highways, and the companies that market such products. Tampering with the emission system of a motor vehicle used on public roads is a clear violation of the Clean Air Act. The RPM Act will provide the racing community with certainty and confidence in the face of an EPA interpretation of the Clean Air Act that threatens to devastate an American pastime and eliminate jobs in our communities. And remember, this doesn't just affect race cars for track and off-road use. This affects you guys with your ordinary cars with exhaust systems, even if they have cats, even if the only thing you've done is put a turbocharger on it, it doesn't matter. It's such a blanket statement that we'll all be in trouble. I just ordered a whole bunch of parts for the M3, and it's basically just velocity stacks, an airbox, and an intake. It doesn't really change the emissions of the car that much, but it looks like that wouldn't be legal if the EPA had their way. That's pretty concerning. And just what's even crazier, before we move on to the next thing, I want to show you guys this clip. They tried to do this in 2015. I didn't have my license in 2015. I didn't get my license until 2016, and I didn't get my first car until 2017. And so if they had done this and had their way, you know, I would have never been able to do any of the things I wanted to do with my Subaru. I mean, I don't know. I mean, because there's this weird dynamic in the U.S. where the feds will disagree with the state level people, and so the state might say, oh, it's fine, you know, we don't require emissions here, or this, that, and the other, or you can just title your car on a state level, it's not a big deal. But then if the feds ever find you, you're doomed anyways. So you want to make sure at the federal level, not just the state level, that we're going to be safe. Because obviously, a race car that is driven a handful of times a year and is stored in, you know, under a tarp with a trickle charger for most of its lifetime is not a massive contributor to emissions. I mean, there are millions and millions and millions of cars, ordinary cars that pass emissions, even when we go fully electric, there's still going to be emissions from electric vehicles being recycled and remanufactured and things being mined to make batteries and stuff and to transport cars from different countries. There's still going to be emissions from that. And I don't have any numbers to give you guys, but I can't see motorsports being a significant contributor when there are so many other things that can and should be regulated better if we are trying to save the planet. Which makes me think that that's not even what this is really about. This isn't really about saving the planet, because I can't see how this is going to help. Because we're talking about modified cars. The modified car community is not a majority. They're targeting something that's easy to target so that they can say, oh, we have the environment in our best interests, and they know there aren't as many people to be angry about it because they're only going to make us mad. They're not going to make normal people mad. They're not going to make the majority mad. But anyways, before I start ranting, which I will do, let's go to YouTube. And actually, no, I can probably just Google this. It's Richard Hudson, who's, I think, a very important name in SEMA. Hold on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Administrator McCarthy, for joining us today. Madam Administrator, I'm sure you're familiar with EPA's proposed rule released last July that proposed new greenhouse gas standards for medium and heavy-duty trucks.
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that in the middle of that proposed rule, there's a proposal by EPA to make it illegal to modify vehicles used solely for competition?
No, sir, I don't believe that that's what it says, but
I don't believe that's what it says. I'm not aware of the fact that that's in our own new proposal. We're not aware of this. Hold on. Oh. Sorry about that. I had to get the child. All right, so let's continue.
I understand the section that you're talking about.
Well, I can read the language to you. It says certified motor vehicles and motor vehicle engines and their emission control devices must remain in their certified configuration even if they're used solely for competition or if they become non-road vehicles or engines. It seems pretty clear to me. In your opinion, are owners of vehicles that have been modified so they can be used for competition now in violation of the law?
Sir, there is a clear exemption in the statute that addresses NASCAR and other professional...
NASCAR. We're talking about certified road vehicles being converted into race cars, and she goes to NASCAR. Do NASCAR vehicles, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 17 digits in a VIN? Do NASCAR stock cars even have 17-digit VINs? I'm willing to bet they don't. A lot of cars purpose-built for racing just have like chassis stamps on them or something, right? They don't have VINs so that you can register them for road use. She goes straight to NASCAR. It's so strange. And that's not the last time she thinks we're talking about NASCAR. When we're talking about modified vehicles, not vehicles made solely for racing. A race car is a car that has been made by the manufacturer for racing. Like, eventually I'd love to make my M3 an off-road only car with a fantastic power plant, an awesome exhaust system, an exterior and all that, and just have it for tracks and like special events. It wasn't born as a race car, but it is a race car at that point. That's what we're basically talking about. We're not just talking about full-fledged race cars, we're also talking about ordinary people who just like bought like a Cobb Stage 1 package or something,
Raceways and why we do not regulate those vehicles. I think we were very directly trying to make sure that we are doing no more than what we've done before in terms of either compliance or enforcement. And we're trying to recognize that exemption in that rule. Now, I fully recognize that this has raised a lot of confusion, and we need to address this.
This has raised a lot of confusion. I think you're raising a lot of confusion. I think you're confused. We're quite clear about what we're concerned about. We're not confused. We're concerned.
Confusion moving forward, because there is no way. NASCAR's been a great partner of EPA.
We're still talking about NASCAR.
They do great work on biofuels. The last thing I want to do is alienate them. That's for sure.
I appreciate that, but NASCAR is one facet. Yes. But what about your man or woman who likes to take a car in their backyard and fix it up and take it down to the local drag strip and race it? I mean, that kind of modification, it appears very clearly, is now ruled out.
Well,
thank you for not letting her get away with that nonsense.
We have never, ever enforced on an individual of that nature. What we're trying to do is get at manufacturers of these devices that they sell and make sure that they sell them only for competitive, dedicated vehicles, because it's really challenging to us to make sure that the certified vehicles remain in compliance with air regulations.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, but it says here, emission control devices must remain in a certified configuration even if they're used solely for competition. I mean, it sounds different. The rule sounds different from what you're explaining.
We'll do the very best we can. We actually we've had substantial amounts of discussion. Whatever we can do to clarify this, we're going to be able to take those steps.
Well, I think taking the word solely used for competition out,
I'll have to see it in its entirety. I'm not a lawyer.
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. I don't know what section of this new proposal you're talking about is, and I have no authority on this topic. Wait a minute.
I appreciate the need to use common sense language. I know that what I've told you is what our intent was. We will make sure that the language matches that.
Okay, well, I certainly appreciate that, because not only is this an important part of the way of life for a lot of Americans who enjoy taking cars and modifying them so they can race, but it's a $1 billion industry of aftermarket folks who make parts for people to use in competition. I remember back in February, you testified before the committee and you made the point that not one EPA regulations ever cost one job. Well, I'm telling you, this is a $1 billion industry that would be wiped out if we can't clarify this and make sure the intent you've expressed is reflected in the regulation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Boom. Mic drop. That was Richard. You're a legend. That was pretty well put. So yeah, it's I'm sure you've already seen enough. Just show that clip to people, give the article to people, and let's protect a $2 billion hobby, you guys. What do you think, little strawberry? Huh? Now I'm just gonna go on a brief rant. I'm trying to be pretty professional about this. This is a serious topic. We all need to be civil about it. I guess. It's I think my main issue is that I have no issue with regulating things to protect the planet, because we have truly messed things up when it comes to the environment, and it's good to offset our emissions and protect things, and because right now the Earth is the only thing we have. We haven't made a moon base. We haven't tried to figure out how to terraform Mars. We haven't figured out how to become an interstellar civilization. We're not even a is it in classes, the civilization scale? We're not even a class 1. We're like 0.73 or something. But that's not relevant. But as you can see, it's likely that the EPA still has no idea what they're talking about, and they're making some pretty big blanket statements in their documentation. Even if their representatives don't know the details of the documentation, they don't realize how many people this is going to adversely affect. I don't think that necessarily makes them bad people, but they're acting like an authority on a topic that they don't fully understand. But let's do like an internal experiment. For those of you that didn't know, the meat industry is a huge contributor to global emissions. Huge, massive, like one of the biggest, if not the biggest. I don't have like any research I can show you. I just am aware that it is a massive industry and a massive contributor. Let's apply the same logic that the EPA is using against modified car owners. Let's say the EPA did something similar and decided to change regulations of the meat industry and make them stricter, but not on like fast food or really unethical farming methods, but instead said, you are no longer allowed to go out with a gun and shoot like a rabbit or a turkey because we want to help the planet. It's basically the same thing, but fewer people are going to be in uproar about it, and it's going to have, it's the same thing. Because obviously going out with a gun and shooting a turkey or a rabbit or whatever, or an elk or a deer to get venison is going to have a very tiny impact on the global scale, or even just the nationwide scale in terms of emissions. Sure, you have to drive a truck somewhere. You might have to manufacture guns, manufacture bullets, or whatever. Even so, the emissions that a random turkey hunter is contributing is nowhere near as bad as battery farms and all sorts of that other stuff. That's what they should be regulating. But instead, they've decided to say turkey farmers aren't allowed to be turkey farmers anymore because there are fewer turkey farmers to be angry about it. So it's what it is. Which is why I don't even think this is really about health of the planet. This is just about appearing to care. If they really do care, they would start regulating factories. They'd be switching to renewables. They'd be switching to nuclear. They'd be urging people to own a car for more than 2 years. They'd be urging people to recycle more and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of corporations would not appreciate that, Car manufacturers want to sell new cars every year. Factories are factories, and they don't want to go out of business. Like, imagine if the EPA said, we're switching to synthetic meat. You are no longer allowed to use any actual natural organic meat in any of your meals. That is now illegal. Could you imagine what would happen if they did that? That would take a long time to overcome the resistance that would be met with such a statement, such a proposal. It's totally different to saying, hey, we're just going to ban turkeys, and that's it. And we care about the planet. Peace. It's just not quite the same thing, which it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. A race car that drives 8 times a year, it's inconsequential. But I will say, the effect this statement will have on people is that this whole, the aftermarket and the industry of motorsport will be crushed. So, yeah, it sucks. It's weird. I don't know why government agencies sometimes do things like this where you just go, there's no way you're doing this for the reasons that you're declaring. Oh well, let's hope that we win this. I want to keep modifying cars. And like I said, if they had gotten this way in 2015, I never would have been able to build my WRX the way I wanted to, because that would have been considered illegal. Very illegal. Even though it wouldn't really make it not emissions compliant. But now let's talk about all the people that right now don't have their license or don't have a car, but they love cars and want to get into this. What are they going to do? People that have grown up looking at people build all these cars and then being inspired to do these things because they think it would make them really happy. They might want to get a job in motorsports or making parts or start a company or anything like that. They wouldn't be able to. At least not in this country. I don't know. Maybe I should start an LLC in Alberta, Canada, and then just register all my cars there. I could just daily driven exotics the whole thing. But I really hope I don't have to do that. Because one of the main reasons why I was so excited about coming back to the U.S. back in 2015 and 2016 was to get my license and have a car and start doing stuff with cars. I lived overseas most of my life, so I couldn't get a permit at 15 or 16. I had to wait until I was 18. And I got my license when I was 18. I got my first car when I was 19. And that was just the beginning of a new life for me. See? And I want Ellie to have the opportunity to enjoy that too. My daughter here, you can see her fuzzy head. She's dressed as a strawberry. This isn't the good guy thing to do. I'm not saying, oh, screw the environment, global warming is a hoax and climate change isn't real. I'm not saying that it's not real. That's real. It's all an issue that we have to solve. Otherwise, my daughter's going to face the consequences, and my kids' grandkids are going to face the consequences if we don't start doing something now. It's a lot easier to do damage than to fix stuff, and the longer we wait, the more doomed we're all going to be. Well, anyways, I'm going to go back to being a dad, and you guys do your research, do some reading. If you're not quite sure yet, read the article, watch videos, see what other people have to say about it, and hopefully we can beat this thing. All right? Take it easy, everyone. Sorry that this video was not quite... Are you waving? She was waving, but you couldn't see. I'm not really asking... No, I'm not going to ask you guys to subscribe. That's not what this video is about. This video isn't about getting views or getting subscribers. This is about doing the right thing. So just spread this video, and yeah, fingers crossed, everyone.